Hello everyone, and welcome to today's lesson. What we're going to be doing today is we are going to be focusing our efforts on character animation. So I hope that everyone had an opportunity to go onto the Autodesk character generator to make their own character. Nevertheless, if you haven't had the opportunity or there's some weird issues going on, I have a couple of pre-made stock characters that are up and available for everyone to use. Though again, I would strongly encourage making your own. It's an opportunity for everyone to get creative and such. So I hope that you take advantage of that. In terms of what we have for today is we are going to go into a little bit of character animation. So if anyone wants to eventually do some character animation, today's lecture will at least give you an idea of what you are in for. So the objective for this is taking the actual character that we have and basically taking it into Maya. Now, since it's going to take a moment or two for this to come up, I just want to explain how this works. So you'll have your zip file somewhere. Oh, here it is. Okay, I may have deleted that, but that's okay. Once you actually take out the zip and basically make it into a normal folder, this is what you hopefully should see. You should see a Maya file and then 3 different maps. One would be specifically for color. So if any of you remember some of the stuff that we were doing before with textures, this is that at the next level. So everything that you see here will be going onto our character. And then we have 2 other parts. We have one called bully spec, at least for me, and bully height map. Now what this basically is it's similar to what I showed with the traditional bump maps, but actually taken to the next level. So as I was saying before, very briefly though, that basically everything we see here has a little information to make this look, well, a little bit more interesting. Now, when you're working with this, it's imperative that you keep all these files in the same folder if you want this to work. If you do, you don't have to readjust or change anything with your Maya file. All you should need to do is just double-click the actual file itself, and it'll come in momentarily. Now, since that'll take a little bit of time to load up, let's talk a little bit more about the main goals for this week. So the first thing I want to do is I want to show everyone how to actually make your character rig work. So hopefully, again, you followed all the instructions from the last video. If you have, what you need to do next should be child's play. Now, besides that, we also need to look at how the HumanIK Rig system works. It's basically all the controllers and such, how the limbs move, creating facial expressions, as that is a different section, the importance of poses, and idle animation. Now, getting back to these areas over here, if you don't know where these elements are, it can be very intimidating to get started with the animation process. But if you have an idea of where to locate these, which I'm going to be teaching you today, it does make the animation process considerably easier. So now just an idea of what's going on for the homework. Basically, your goal is to create 2 poses and have your character naturally go from one to the other and create an idle animation. And we'll discuss that as we progress today's lecture. Now, this is going to be due on April 22nd on Wednesday. But again, this will give you about a week and a half to work on it from today's lecture. And something I want you to consider, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to really answer this today, but I want you to consider what would you want to do for a final project? Because at this point, I've taught everyone how to basically do some modeling for assets. I've shown a little bit on how to model furniture, tech, and that kind of thing. We've gone over animation and how you could use it for either simple animations, anything with motion graphics. We've shown a little bit of that. And today I'm going to do character animation. Next week, I do want to show one last thing, and that is going to be sculpting. And that is going to be an opportunity for people to do some simple sculpting in Maya. But I want you to consider what you might want to do for that final project. Okay, so anyways, here's our character. Now, 2 things you might want to do before you get started with the whole process is 1, you will want to turn on your textures, obviously. If you hit the 6 button, and as long as you keep everything in the same spot, you should be able to see the textures immediately. The second thing I'd recommend, whenever you're doing an animation for characters, it's always a good idea to have a floor, even if it's just temporary. And the floor should be pretty big. So in this case, I'm going to put this at 25 by 25. That should be more than big enough. If I need to add more later, I can. You know what? I'm going to be extra safe. I'm putting this at 50 by 50. There we go. Now there's some shenanigans going on back here. If necessary, you know, it's going to be necessary. So I'm going to fix this up a little bit. If you're noticing that you have a big scene and all of a sudden it's getting kind of cut off, like what's going on here, this is how you can fix it. If you have your outliner available, and if you don't, you can go to Window, Outliner, and here we are. Go to the perspective camera. It's basically should be on the first on the top. Double click it, the actual icon. Yep, there we go. So again, it's the PERSP camera. And there should be an option that says near clip and far clip. If you take a moment, go to the far clip and just change that from 32, or whatever number might be there, to 300. That'll give you more than enough space to do whatever you need. Look at nice. Okay, so technically that was 3 things. I apologize about that. But we turned on our texture, we made ourselves a floor, and if necessary, we also made it so that the camera went a bit of a further distance. It also wouldn't be a bad idea to lock that floor in place. Once again, you could do so by going to the layer option and just locking that in place like this. Okay, so now that that's done, we can go to the next step, which is turning on our controllers. So we're going to need to go to a completely new area for ourselves, and that new area is going to be the HumanIK section. Now this can be found at the top of your screen. It looks like a little AOL dude in overalls. Anyway, if you click this, you'll see this new area appear. Now some of you might have run into this before. This is normal and okay. But if you want to turn on your controllers, because in theory you could actually select what we have over here, but a better way to work with this is go to where it says Source, go to Control Rig. So again, in the character area, you should be in the section you need to be in, hit the drop down, hit Control Rig, and it might take a moment, but bam, there are your controllers. And yeah, the way that this works, I'm basically going to, let's see here. Going to use these controllers for most of my stuff, is basically the way the legs are is you have to select them manually, but you can actually select these, and when you control the feet like so, your leg kind of follows with it. This is a type of controller called IK, or inverse type controller. Now what's neat about this is if you do select these this way, they should move. However, if I move my person around, basically using the little green option over here, this is what could be considered my center of mass, I can go down, but the feet don't go anywhere. So that's the advantage of using the whole IK controller for the limbs. Now, the arms use a combination of IK, or inverse controller, or FK, which is forward kinematics. Now, the nice thing about this is I can actually select the shoulder over here. I could bring this down like so, or I could actually select the hand on the other side and use the move tool to move this down as well. Certain situations, it might be easier to do one versus the other. Also, when you do bring your arms down, it would be a wise decision to bring down the shoulders a little bit, as the shoulders are a little bit on the rigid side. But you bring those shoulders down a bit, it does make this easier. So I'm just going to put my little soldier guy, I actually call them bully, to attention. So I'm just putting his stuff to the side, like so. And what I want to do here is I basically want to show you the basic controllers for this person. Now, when it comes to, I'm going to move this a little bit more forward. The way that this is done, and the way I usually would recommend it for animators to do, is whatever you're doing your animation, the green, this area over here, should be your first priority. So basically, if you need to move your person's hips up or down eventually, this would be the first place you go. Then second would be your legs. Now, a little bit of a heads up. If you select the actual foot, you can move this over like so. Take the other side, move this over like so. You can use the rotate to rotate these over. And if you have to basically change where the knee is, you could either use the move tool to move this manually, or you can use the rotation. Oh, I think you have to actually use the rotation up here. And you can also rotate the entire leg, should you need to do that. Depending on how your feet are faced will determine on which one of those you choose. Okay, now for the back, nice thing about the back is, again, and I'm mostly focusing on my efforts on this area over here, when you rotate the top, the other two go down like so, going forward, going back. A little bit of a heads up though, try to avoid going further than a human can actually move. So for example, you might rotate about like somewhere around here for a person, and you might rotate back somewhere around here. But if you go too far, you're eventually not going to look human anymore. So you got to be careful. You can also do a combination of rotating here where the spine begins a little bit, then up here to get a more natural look. All depends on what you need. And the head's the same way. Basically, you select the head itself. You should be able to move this back and forth. Now the eyes kind of run in a different way. There's actually two bones, or at least they should be two bones over here. Now for some reason you can't see these bones. There's a way you can fix that. If you go to Display, Animation, Joint Size. So again, Display, Animation, Joint Size. And these are big from another lecture I had. Yeah, so normally they should be at a value of around 1. So you might not be able to see it right away. And by the way, if you can't see it at all, like what's going on over here, you can use an option called shading to help fix this. Now the specific shading you need is if you go to shading and then X-ray joints, it has to be that specific one. So shading, X-ray joints. This should allow you to see every joint that's in your body. But the nice thing about this is if you were to render this eventually, you won't see those. But as you can see, I can move and rotate my eye all over the place. And nice thing about this too is I can rotate both my eyes simultaneously. I can have them move up, I can have them move down, however I need to. Now, the arms are a bit of tricky business, so that's why I saved these for last. Now the arms themselves, basically how these work is the very top area, this is what's called the parent, would basically control everything below it, which is basically these areas. Now you can move this up or down, or again, kind of move forward and back like this. It's a pretty sturdy rig system, so that's nice. Be careful with over-rotating, though, because again, you don't want this to rotate too much. Now, again, for the elbow, you can either move this up or move this. Oh, you can only move it down so much, as you can see. And you won't be able to actually move this in a way that's too strange. But the reason why I wanted to show this in particular is if you're going in a certain kind of pose, like for example, I don't know why he would do this, but say that I wanted to have him do the Wonder Woman, I could basically use the IK controller over here to move his hand like this. But if I wanted his elbow out, I would either have to rotate this area and then bring this out a little bit more, which would work. Or I can go to this area over here, rotate it to the side, and then just move this out a little bit. But your best bet when it comes to basically bringing the elbows up and down, I'll actually bring this up so you can see this a bit easier, would be to rotate the shoulder. Yeah, there we go. So that looks a lot more realistic right there. So that's basically how the arms work. And finally, when it comes to the hands, you got one of two options. You could either go to the hand option over here, and this actually has some controllers. By the way, I'll get to there again so you can see that. So the hand itself, again, you can just select that area. But to select the fingers, you can actually select this little arrow, and this will allow you to basically select the entire finger and rotate that upwards like so. Or if you need to just rotate one section, that's what these little areas here can do. You could basically just take one little section over here and move it like so. And then I could move back and forth to get the opposable finger and such like that. It all depends on Again, exactly what I need. So what I would do is try to kind of play around with these settings yourself a little bit, at least for the body. So I'll give you a moment or two. So in other words, I'll take a 5-second pause before I go to the next step and just take a look at each of these different options. Again, to get back to your normal area, hit the triangle over here. This will get you back here. And again, just get an idea how the feet work, how the hips work, how the spine works, the head, the arms, and the fingers. So have a 5-second pause, and then we'll continue. Took a little bit longer because I did have a little sip of my coffee. So that basically, again, takes care of the main body itself. But what we need to do next is, well, how do we actually change the facial expressions? We were able to change the eye, but where's the face? Well, there's 2 ways we can approach this. Now, if everyone followed directions last time, you hopefully turned on an option for when you were creating your character that said blend shaping. So if you hit that correctly, and hopefully everyone did, you should be able to go to Window, Animation Editors, and Shape Editor. So again, Windows, Animation Editors, Shape Editors. And this will give you pretty much every facial expression that you potentially could ever need. So in other words, all the top ones over here are specifically for lip syncing. We have other options here for lips. So for example, I can bring my lip up like this, or I can make the lip go down like this, if that's what I need to do. It has an option specifically to move the jaw. It has the option to chew. That one's kind of a neat one right there, I'm going to be honest. It has an option for looking disgusted. It has the option for kissing. Probably one of the more useful ones, I got to admit, is the eye close. So I can actually select both these at the same time, and I can close the eyes like that. Although, if you were to do it realistically, you'd also have to select the brows going down a little bit. Because again, if you actually take a look at someone blinking, like a videotape of your own self blinking, or looking at someone else, there's a good chunk of the time where the eyebrows will go down with your eyes. And this is just for the head. If necessary, there's also options for the teeth. I'm going to be honest, at least for what we're doing these next couple days, you probably will not need this. But still, it might not be a bad idea to check these areas out. So take a look at each of these different sections. In fact, what I'd like you to do is I want you to give your character a facial expression. So you can pause the video right here. I'm just going to take a moment to make myself a little bit of a facial expression here. So I'm just going to have him kind of squint a little bit as if he's wondering, what the heck are those crazy kids doing this time? I'm going to bring this over. There we are. Oop, went a little too far and actually got my teeth here. I need that to be up, but yeah, there we are. So let's see if I can find something that's, I wouldn't say disgust, but wouldn't be a bad idea to have something maybe frown a little bit. Well, that'll work. There we are. Okay, well, my character is now all but ready to animate. Again, if you get the general idea. What I'd like everyone to do for their first exercise, so to speak, is I'd like everyone to try and get your character into a pose and into an actual facial expression. Now, I have a couple tips that'll help with that. First thing I'd recommend if a person is going to be doing that is do a little research on how a certain kind of poses could be. So for example, if you want your character to have a very particular look, one of the best ways you can approach this is take your cell phone camera, or any camera for that matter, and just think about the pose they might want to be in. and then just put them in said pose. Again, if you use your camera, one of the nice things about this is most likely you're going to be seeing that pose in real time, and if you're doing it yourself, you'll actually have a physical feel for it. Now, if that ends up being the case, or if you think that the pose might be a little tricky, or if you're running a little low on inspiration, that happens too sometimes, you can go to Poses, and you can find some good-looking poses here. So, for example, for my character, I think something like this could actually work out pretty good for him. So I think I'm going to actually give him this pose. So I can already see that, let's see, he definitely has his hips made a specific way. By the way, not safe for work, sorry about that. I have his legs going down like so. I have his arms going over like this. So I have an idea of where he's going to be going. So I'm going to try and get him in that position too. So first thing I would want to do is I'd want to move the hips in a very specific way. I'm going to move this foot over a little bit, rotate that out a little bit, move this over and out. I'm going to move my hips a little bit, move this area up a little bit. And looking back at my reference, I'm putting my hands on my hips and having them look to the right. Well, technically his left, our right. And yeah, I'm just going to rotate his hands over like so. And just the last part would be the thumb, the opposable part. So I can just bring this over like that. Then do the same thing for the other side. Basically have him bring up his arm, rotate around. Try not to go too far though. Again, this is someone who's actually human, so you don't want to go too nuts with that. And just putting my hand here, bringing that up. That looks pretty good. Now I want to put the eyes looking in the distance. So there we go. And with that, my first pose is ready. And let's see, we have this at about 23 minutes. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop the video at this time. Now what we're going to do for the next part is for video 2, we're going to basically animate going from one pose to another, because that's kind of the homework assignment anyway. And for that, we need to see how the control system works. So best thing you could do for yourself is, again, try to get your character into a pose, learn how the different elements here work. Don't forget, again, you need to go to Window, Animation Editors, and go to the Shape Editor to basically play around with the facial expressions. And don't forget that the eyes are controlled by their own bones. And once you select them, you can basically do whatever you wish to do with them. Well, rotation-wise anyways. So, yeah, get your character into a pose, and we'll start off very shortly. So, good luck, and I hopefully you'll find that this pose, the rig system will hopefully be agreeable to you. Okay, see you on the next one.